morning they stapled owner evicted signs to my pine trees, something in me went cold and quiet. Like the creek in January, when it crusts over and keeps running anyway. I'd driven up at dawn. Coffee in a thermos, my dad's old flannel on the passenger seat. The cabin roof wore a thin lace of frost. Blue jays hopped along the porch rail like little cops on patrol. Then I saw the paper. Bright, smug orange. One on the gate. 2 on the porch posts. Another nailed right into the bark of a 100-year-old sugar pine that my father and I planted the summer my mom got sick. The nailheads glittered like tiny insults. I tore the first one down, then the second. Same wording every time. Evicted by order of High Ridge HOA. Property transfer in process. There was a number to call. There was a seal that looked official if you didn't know any better. I knew better. We were 5 miles outside their subdivision line. My place sat on the old logging tract, deeded to my grandfather in 1959, long before High Ridge carved its cul-de-sacs into the slope and started policing bird feeders and porch lights. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A white SUV rolled up, headlights still on, breath puffing from the tailpipe. A woman stepped out, 40 maybe, hair pulled tight, sunglasses too big for the winter light. "Morning," she said, like she was delivering a casserole. "I'm Denise, HOA president." I took another sign down and folded it in half. "You're trespassing, Denise." Her smile didn't move. "You've been notified. The board voted last night. You're in violation of setback standards and unpaid access fees. Under annexation policy, parcels abutting High Ridge common land are subject to compliance." "There's no annexation," I said. Simple, like telling a child the stove is hot. "This is Fetterman Creek Lot B. Separate plat, separate C, C and Rs. None." She pulled a folder from the SUV like a magician pulling scarves. "We have a recorded amendment. Filed Friday. The easement you use? It's ours now. Which means your cabin is ours until you bring it to code." My stomach did a slow flip. The easement. The old logging road that crossed the corner of their gossip-friendly neighborhood before dipping into my trees. I'd used it since I was tall enough to see over the wheel. Had a written read of way, notarized and everything. "Show me," I said. She tilted the papers just enough for me to see a notary stamp. A deed book reference. The sort of legalese that turns honest men into quiet men. She tucked it back before I could read more. "We'll be back with a contractor," she said. "And the sheriff. By end of day?" The SUV hissed away, smug as a snake. The blue jays scolded from the sugar pine. I stood in the thin sun, hands cold, listening to the mountain breathe. I could smell sap where the nails bit the tree. I could hear my father's voice, low and steady, the way he sounded when a horse spooked or a storm rolled over the ridge. "Slow down. Check the gate. Check the map. Check yourself." I took the old key off the hook, nailed under the porch step, unlocked the cabin, and stepped inside. It smelled like cedar and wood smoke and the hot metal memory of summer. My wife, Emily, had framed the original deed in a cheap oak frame we bought at the hardware store. It hung above the mantel next to a faded photograph of my dad in a wool cap. Holding up the first brook trout I ever caught, I pulled down the deed, laid it on the table, and spread next to it the survey my grandfather kept rolled in a cardboard tube. The boundary line was clear as a courthouse bell. The easement was a dotted path with a note penned in his tight handwriting. Right of ingress. Egress granted. July 12, 1972. Recorded. I ran my finger along that dotted road. The phone number on the sign stared at me from the table where I'd dropped it. I dialed, put it on speaker. When a man answered, his voice had the smile in it you use when you've practiced being important. "Hi, Ridge, HOA office. Is the owner of Fetterman Creek Lot B," I said. "You've posted signs on my property? Remove them now. I'm afraid the board has lawful authority," he said. "Our attorney name?" I said. "Give me the attorney's name." He cleared his throat. "You'll receive all correspondence in due process." I hung up. I don't slam phones anymore. I just set them down and listen to the click of my patience putting itself away. By 10, a county cruiser rolled in. Deputy Morales stepped out, hands up in that calm way that says, "I'm here to keep the peace if you let me." We knew each other. He'd had chili at our cabin last deer season. He tipped his hat at the signs I'd piled on the porch table. "Got a complaint?" he said. "HOA says you're removing official postings." "HOA says a lot of things." I showed him the deed, the survey, my grandfather's note. His mouth tugged sideways in a shape that said, this was going to be a day. "Mind if I take pictures?" He asked. "Mind if I make coffee?" I asked back. He smiled. I poured, and the cabin filled with that dark, steady smell that makes a kitchen feel like a place where good men decide next moves. The SUV returned. Now with a truck behind it. Two men in orange vests hopped out with a tape measure like they meant to measure my life inch by inch. Denise followed. Folder thicker now, lips thinner. "Deputy," she said, "we'll need you to witness." Morales took a slow sip of coffee and said nothing. "Before anyone witnesses anything," I said, "I'm calling the county recorder." I dialed on speaker again. The recorder, a woman named Bev, with more common sense than a room full of boards, answered on the second ring. "Bev, it's Sam Carter. I need a look at any filings touching Fetterman Creek Lot B and any changes to the High Ridge plat." I could hear her keyboard clattering. "Give me 20, she said. "Then come by. Text me if you find anything before I get there." Denise flapped her folder. "We have the filings right here. Then you won't mind if we verify," I said. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but I could feel the glare. They measured my porch steps. They measured the distance from the EV to the driplin. They measured the air like they could own that, too. I let them measure. Some fights you pick, some you document. By noon, my phone buzzed. "Bev, come now. Bring the papers they showed you, if they let you." I looked at the mountain. The sun had warmed the frost into glittering tears along the porch railing. I looked at the sugar pine, sap beating around the nail holes like clear blood. "Denise," I said, "I'll be back in an hour. Don't touch my trees. Don't touch my door. Don't touch my father's pine." She gave me that casserole smile again. 1 hour. I nodded to Morales. He nodded back. I got in my truck, set the thermos in the holder, and the tires hummed against the gravel like a drumbeat. Down the old logging road. Past the High Ridge entrance with its stone sign and winter pansies, tucked in the mulch like they expected applause. Toward town. Toward truth. Sometimes you don't need anger. You need paper, and men who remember where the lines are drawn. County offices smell like toner and patience. Bev waved me through the door with a look I remember from my mother when I came home muddy, worried. "Forgiving, ready to see what trouble I'd found?" "I pulled your parcel history," she said. Spreading pages on the counter. "Lot B, Fetterman Creek. Deeded to your grandfather in 59. Quiet title confirmed in 85. And here." She tapped a page with her pen. "Your right-of-way, recorded July 13th, 1972. It's clean." I let my shoulders drop an inch. So what are they waving around? She pushed forward another document. Fresh filed Friday. High Ridge HOA recorded a protective covenant extension claiming annexation of all abutting parcels for purposes of access and compliance. They attached a map, but she turned the page and laid a county GIS printout on top. The map's wrong. They shifted the subdivision boundary 200 feet north. Looks like they overlaid an old survey and didn't reconcile. "Accidental?" I asked. She raised one eyebrow. "You tell me? I took a photo? Can you certify copies?" She nodded, ran the machine, the seals stamping with the soft thunk of authority. "Also," she said, "there's a notice of trustee sale they drafted for your parcel. Not recorded. Dated next month. Looks like they plan to proceed if you didn't cure the delinquency." Delinquency. The word sat like a cockroach on my tongue. There is no delinquency. "Not unless you owe them for breathing mountain air," she said. "I'll email the county attorney." "But Sam," she leaned in, "don't let them near your gate again today." I walked out into thin winter sun, the courthouse flag snapping like it remembered storms I'd slept through. I called Emily. They posted, "What?" She said, voice tight, protective. "I'm on my way." "Bring the fireproof box," I said. "The original deed, Dad's letters, and the photo of Grandpa staking the line." "You want the photo?" She asked softer. "I want them to see faces." On my way back up the mountain, I detoured to see an old friend, Hank Whitaker, Surveyor Emeritus, who keeps his maps rolled like cigars and his opinions unrolled entirely. "They moved the line," he said, peering over his glasses while his shop heater ticked. "Kid, we pounded those pins in the year your dad cracked his collarbone, falling off the hay wagon." He found a drawer labeled F, tugged out a tube, unrolled it on the workbench. There it was again. The dotted right-of-way. The bend at the Big Fir. The creek where brookies hide under roots like coins in a jar. "Mind if I borrow this?" I asked. "I'll do you one better," he said. He pulled on a coat, grabbed a metal detector and a sledge, and tossed them in the back of his truck. "Let's go sing to the pins." Back at the cabin, a small delegation had gathered like crows at a picnic. Denise, the two vest guys. A third man in a wool coat with a legal pad and the posture of someone who writes more than he builds. "Attorney?" I asked. He extended a hand. "Randall Greer, counsel for High Ridge." I handed him the certified copies. "Recorder says your annexation map is aspirational." He skimmed, then nodded toward Denise. "We'll review." Hank clomped up, metal detector buzzing like a beehive. "Where's your southeast corner?" He asked me. "By the Big Fir," I said. We tromped through crusted grass, snow squeaking under our boots. Blue sky, thin air, our breath like smoke. The detector trilled near the trunk. Hank knelt, brushed aside needles, and there it was, the old brass cap. He rapped it with the hammer and the sound rang true, like a bell at a small church. He looked up at Greer. "Your map drifts north," he said. "Your pins don't. Land doesn't move because boards vote." Greer shifted his weight. "Regardless, the right-of-way is recorded," I said, holding up Bev's stamped copy, "and predates your HOA. I have traveled it peaceably longer than you've been practicing whatever you're practicing." Dust haloing the sunlight. Emily's Subaru followed, tailgate loaded. The box, a thermos, a photo album. She climbed out, cheeks pink from the cold, and hugged me like armor. Then she set the fireproof box on the porch and opened it like a preacher opening a Bible. "This," she said to Greer, laying out the original deed. "This the notarized right-of-way. And this?" She held up a sepia photo of Grandpa in suspenders, my father as a boy at his side, both of them squinting at the camera, one hand on a stake, the other steady as a promise. Denise's casserole smile finally cracked. "None of this changes the fact your cabin violates our design standards," she said. "Tin chimney cap. Non-approved porch stain. Visible wood pile." I laughed. Couldn't help it. The sound popped out like a cork. "Out here," I said. "We call that winter." A neighbor I recognized from the edge of High Ridge pulled up in a pickup stacked with firewood. Name was Tom. We'd helped him winch his tractor out of a ditch to Summer's back. He climbed out, hat in hand. "Did y'all annex me too?" he asked, almost hopeful. "Because if you did, I'm going to need them to approve the moose that keeps eating my lilacs." A couple of other trucks lined the shoulder. Folks watched. Word spreads fast in a valley. People aren't as alone as they think. Greer cleared his throat. "We're willing to discuss a temporary compliance arrangement while we resolve the mapping discrepancy." "No," I said. Calm. Cold Creek Tom. "You will rescind the postings in writing. You will remove every copy of that bogus map from the record. And you will leave my property." Denise stepped forward. "You can't talk to us like Morales stepped between us, one hand low, a quiet stop sign." "Ma'am," he said to her, "you're on his property without lawful cause. The county recorder's office has flagged your filing. If you'd like to avoid a trespass complaint, I recommend you step back and confer with counsel off-site." For the first time, her voice slipped. "We had to try," she muttered, almost to herself. "The board promised the view corridor." "Your roofline, the view," I said, sudden heat rising toward my ears, "belonged to the mountain before it belonged to your brochures."
Ah, yes.
Silence went thick and cottony. Then Hank's detector buzzed again at another pin, like a witness raising a hand. By late afternoon, the convoy was gone. The signs were gone. The mountain exhaled. Tom stacked his wood on my porch, shook my hand, said "neighbor's neighbor," and drove off in a cloud of sawdust and goodwill. Emily poured coffee. We sat on the steps, cups hot against our gloves, watching the light slip down the ridge like honey on a spoon. What if they come back? She asked. "They will," I said. "Bullies rarely lose the taste for it the first time." I looked at the pine where the nail holes glistened. I pressed my palm to the bark sticky with sap, the mountain's bandage. I wanted more than a quiet afternoon. I wanted a boundary loud enough to be heard in a boardroom. "Tomorrow," I said, "we make it official." "Official how?" she asked. I thought of Grandpa's notes, of Dad's stories about the old ranger who taught him to plant trees on the windward slope, of an idea I'd toyed with since the subdivision went up. Protect the land by promising it to something bigger than both of us. Conservation, said. In court. She nodded. Good. Let's put this in a frame they can't move. Ah! An owl called from the far draw. Somewhere a far-off siren sketched a reminder that even out here there's always a next thing. The cabin light pooled warm on the snow. Tomorrow, we'd step into town with paper and patience again. Tonight, we sat with the mountain. Tonight, the mountain felt like it sat with us. The county courtroom isn't grand. The ceiling tiles are stained where an old leak taught everyone to keep buckets in the closet. But the judge's bench is solid oak, and I've learned solid matters more than pretty. We filed an emergency petition, declaratory judgment on the right-of-way, and a temporary restraining order against High Ridge interference. County council joined uninvited after Bev's email. When the clerk called our case, Denise and Greer stood at the other table in matching Navy seriousness. Judge Parker peered over reading glasses. He'd hunted elk with my dad and fined me once for speeding downhill in a truck bed full of hay bales. Fair man, not sentimental. Counsel, he said to Greer, your annexation filing appears to contain a boundary error. Greer talked about view corridors. He talked about uniform standards. He waved a binder so thick it had to be rented by the hour. Judge Parker lifted a hand. I asked about your map. Greer finally said the word he'd been avoiding. Discrepancy. Parker turned to me. Mr. Carter, you rely on a 1972 right-of-way? Yes, Your Honor. I held up the certified copy. Recorded, continuous peaceful use. We just sounded the corner pins yesterday. Parker smiled at that. Sang to the pins, did you? He nodded. Like that mattered to him and in counties like ours. It does. He stacked the papers in front of him. Temporary order is granted. HOA will remove any postings from petitioner's property and cease attempts to enforce subdivision covenants beyond their platted boundaries. We'll set a hearing on the merits once the county surveyor files a report. He paused, then added, and counsel, if I find your board knew of the discrepancy when you filed. We'll have a different kind of hearing. Outside, the air tasted like a crisp apple. Denise stood on the courthouse steps, arms crossed hard enough to splinter. For a second, the wind caught her hair, and something human showed through the boardroom. Fear? Frustration? I don't know. But I made a decision then. A line is a line. A neighbor is still a neighbor. Denise, I said, stopping a few feet away. Look up conservation easement. We're placing one on our parcel. That means no subdividing, no short-term rentals, no clear-cutting. Ever. The mountain stays a mountain. She blinked. Why would you? Because the view you want is the same one I want, I said. We just disagree on who holds it. I'm choosing the land. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. Your roofline will stay below the tree line, I said, and I'll plant 2 more sugar pines to replace the nail holes in the first. Greer stepped forward, lawyerly again. Are you offering settlement terms? I'm offering a boundary, I said, and a lesson your board might appreciate if you listen better than you file. Back at the cabin, we called the land trust. A woman named Rachel came up that afternoon with boots, a clipboard, and eyes that saw birds before they made a sound. We walked the property. She noted the creek, the elk trail, the stand of aspen that buzz faintly in July like their own soft applause. She listened when I told her about my dad teaching me to split wood along the grain, not across it. She smiled when Emily pointed to the porch where neighborhood kids learned to tie flies in spring. This land, Rachel said, has a story. We'll write it down so it lasts longer than all of us. I signed nothing without reading. She respected that. We moved slowly, like we were setting a corner pin that mattered. The easement would live on the deed like a backbone. The right-of-way would be reaffirmed in the same filing. Cross-referenced, so any future board who thought about annexing. Our memories would find a wall of words older than their newsletters. The county surveyor came up with Hank 2 days later. They flagged the line. They laughed about men in ties who think pine cones negotiate. Greer showed up once, stayed on the road, watched from behind sunglasses like he was learning a new language. When it was done, I pounded a cedar post next to the sugar pine and hung a small bronze plaque. Nothing flashy. Just this Fetterman Creek Lot B. Carter's 1959, leave it better than you found it. Emily touched the plaque with her glove. He'd like this, she said. Dad or Grandpa? I asked. Both, she said. Late that afternoon, Tom rolled up again with a bag of nails and a thermos of something that smelled like cinnamon. Heard the judge bless the pins, he said. Figured you could use a hand fixing the fence by the old culvert. We worked in easy silence, the kind that speaks fluent neighbor. The hammer beats landed steady. The creek hummed its winter song. At one point, I looked up and saw a few folks from High Ridge on the trail at the property line. No signs this time. No clipboards. Just people. One gave a little wave. I nodded back. Not a truce. Not yet. But maybe the first good page in a book that had too many footnotes. When the paperwork came through a week later, it felt less like a victory and more like a vow. The restraining order became a permanent injunction. The right-of-way got a fresh recording number that sang on the page. The conservation easement settled over the land like a warm blanket you don't notice until the night. Tries to get in and can't. I drove up alone at dusk, wanting a minute with the mountain. The sun spilled copper through the trees. The cabin windows glowed like the kind of welcome you don't need to announce. I poured coffee from the thermos habitant, stood under the sugar pine. The nail holes had sealed into amber beads. You could smell the sweetness if you leaned close. I thought about Denise's face on the courthouse steps. I thought about my dad's rough hand over mine on the chainsaw handle, the way he'd say, "Let the tool do the work." I thought about my grandfather's dotted line, and how, sometimes, the oldest paths are still the right ones if you just keep walking them. I went inside, tossed another log on the fire, and sat at the kitchen table. The framed deed watched from the mantel like a grandfather at a wedding. Emily came in a little later, cheeks red from the cold, set a lemon pie on the counter she'd baked in town because winning should taste like something. We cut 2 slices. We ate standing up, forks clinking. We laughed at nothing. We listened to the ridge settle into night. When I finally spoke, it wasn't about laws or maps. It was about the simple arithmetic of belonging. This cabin isn't mine because paper says so, I said. It's mine because every person who loved me taught me how to love it back. Emily leaned into my shoulder. That's the whole thing, isn't it? Yeah, I said. That's the whole thing. Sometimes standing up for what's right isn't about shouting. It's about showing the line and holding it. Quietly until everyone sees it too. Heritage isn't a trophy. It's a job. You don't win it. You keep it. Have you ever had to fight an HOA or any bully over something that mattered more than money? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every one, and I learn from them. If you believe some fights are worth having, if you think land and legacy are bigger than boardrooms hit, subscribe. Let's stand up together, neighbor to neighbor, and keep what's good, good.